Eminence and Shadow, Episode 3. So this episode covers Chapter 3 and half of Chapter 4 from the manga, and it starts exactly where the last episode ended off, with the Shadow Garden harem basically saying that they're gonna leave. They're gonna leave Cid so that they can scatter across the four corners of the world and gather more information on the Cult of Diabolos. And Cid believes that they are lying to him. Like, after he watches them leave, he believes that that was just an excuse that they used and that they're all grown up now and they no longer have any belief in the Cult of Diabolos. And they're no longer able to entertain his thoughts and his chuny ways. And we see him riding on the train. He's riding towards the Midgar Royal Spell Sword Academy. And on the way there, he's basically saying how it's just like before he was reincarnated, where people who are familiar with the Japanese culture from anime and manga, there's a whole like chuny situation. What is it? Is it seventh grade syndrome or something? Where they believe they're like a protagonist or a superhero or something like that. But then eventually they grow out of that. And Cid never did. And he basically talks about how, like, while everyone else grew out of that, he stayed faithful to his beliefs and to his training. And we see him bashing his head on a rock, basically yelling magic over and over and over again, because he's trained his body, he's trained his mind, he's trained his tactics, and he's been training to try to achieve magic abilities, but he can't because there's no such thing as magic in our world. And so he just keeps screaming magic over and over again. And then he rushes out in front of bright lights and he gets hit by a truck. And this scene actually is played as but it's played as kind of traumatic. I mean, we see him just basically breaking down, bashing his head on a rock until it bleeds, and then jumping in front of a truck. Meanwhile, in the manga and in the light novel, it's actually a lot more hilarious, especially in the manga, because we actually get to see it, because it's drawn. But Cid he's beefy. He's super muscular because he's constantly training. And then after he trains everything, he's finally going to start training magic. And so he's trying to reach enlightenment. So he starts fasting. We see him putting himself up on a cross. He bashes his head not on a rock, but on a tree for ornaments. And because he was fasting, his body shrinks down. But eventually, he sees bright lights and he thinks, this is it. I finally reached enlightenment. And then he happily runs towards the bright lights, where it turns out that the lights was not enlightenment, but it was actually headlights from a truck, and then he gets hit. So, yeah, as you can see from the images that I'm posting, it's a lot more hilarious than the anime portrays it as being. And that's one of my problems with this anime so far, is that it seems like it doesn't know if it wants to be hilarious or serious. So, like, the very first episode was it really was serious and kind of traumatic. Episode 2 was a lot more funny. Episode 3 is a lot more funny, but even some of the funny moments are kind of portrayed as traumatic or more serious. And it's like, I kind of wish that they would just embrace the hilarity of Cid a lot more. So let's make another example. Let's build up to it. So we see Cid, he's on the train, and then he gets onto another train that will take him directly to the actual academy. So the first train was just taking him to Midgar, and then he hops into another train which will take him directly to the Royal Spell Sword Academy. And there we see his two friends, Skell and Poe. And Cid purposely chose them because they're both boring characters that don't have any noticeable traits. So they're easily background characters. And we have a moment where they're almost late. Then they get shoved into the train, and the train's like completely packed to the point where when the train doors open at their destination, they kind of just fall out. So it's kind of basically reminiscence of the trains in Japan, where people just get stuffed in there like sardines in a can. I have no idea how people are able to travel like that. But eventually they arrive at the academy and they see this guy proposing to this girl. Her name is Alexia Midgard. And she's basically like the princess. If you can kind of guess the name, her last name is Midgard. The city that they're in is Midgard. They're in the Midgard Sword Academy. So yeah, you can kind of see she's a big deal. And Poe and Skell have basically made a bet where, with Cid, where the loser has to confess to the most popular girl at school. And so because Cid is trying to portray this bland, boring, mundane background character, he purposely throws the bet and he loses. And so he's forced to express his love to Alexia and ask her out. And he doesn't want to do this, obviously, but he goes through with it. And we see him and he's kind of like shaking and stuttering and mispronouncing words. And then he bows down as he reaches his hand out, like saying, I love you, please go out with me. And while his face is down, he kind of smiles and he's like, nailed it. Like the perfect act. Now she is going to reject me. And that'll be another trope of a background character confessing his love to a popular girl and getting rejected that I can cross off my list. And of course she accepts because nothing ever goes right for Cid. And he's like, what the hell? When the hell did I go towards the rom-com route? So here's another thing where the manga portrays this as so much more hilarious because the manga portrays it more of the act that it is. Here, Cid he's stuttering, he's shaking, and he's confessing, and then he bends down and he smiles and he says, I think I nailed it perfectly. Whereas in the manga, he's inner monologuing in his head all the things to do. He's like, all right, for step 1, I got to do this. I got to reach out my hand. Step 2, I got to bow down at this 90-degree angle. I got to give just enough of a shake to show my nervousness. Step 3, I got to stutter when I'm talking to really show how much of a loser I am. He's basically breaking down the steps as he's going through this. And then at the very end, he's like, all right, the final steps, and I nailed it. Perfect score. And it's hilarious. But they don't do that here. It's just, he does it, and then at the end, you see that it's an act. But in the manga, as he's doing it, he's showing that it's actually an act to us, the audience. And I was like, oh man, that would have been so great to like portray it that way, but they didn't. But yeah, she accepts. So they're now officially boyfriend and girlfriend. And he obviously does not want this because this will bring attention to him. And he doesn't want attention. He wants to be a mob character. He wants to be just that guy in the background that no one recognizes and it just blends in. So while they're having lunch together, he's like, all right, Operation Get Alexia to dump me. And he does so by basically eating all her good food. So because he is not a noble, he's just a scrub. He just gets regular meals for scrubs. Meanwhile, Alexia, because she's a princess, she gets like a steak, she gets dessert, she gets all these like 5-course meals. And she's like, I don't really want to eat this. Sometimes I wish I can eat what you guys have. And he's like, all right, in that case, I'm going to eat your food. And so he's just grabbing all her foods and just stuffing it down his face, not showing any manners, not asking her if he can eat it. Basically, he's trying to act obnoxious so that she would dump him. But she doesn't, so he fails at that. And then she invites him to join his class. So he was in class 9, which is like the lowest when it comes to sword skills. But instead, she has brought him up to class 1, which is the number 1 class when it comes to sword teaching. And so he's, showing his moves and stuff. He's sparring with Alexia. And he's not going to show off his skills. He's showing off just the bland basics. And as he's sparring with her, he realizes that Alexia doesn't really have any great skills. She has the basics down, but she has them down perfectly. So she's perfect when it comes to the absolute basics, but she doesn't do anything else. She doesn't take the basics and make it her own. So her skills are very bland. And as he's doing this, he's talking about how she has an older sister, Iris, and her older sister is like the number one knight. A lot of people look up to her. And because of that, Alexia always feels inferior. She always feels like she's living in Iris's shadow. She's always being compared to her sister and found wanting. And we see her, she walks up to the teacher, the instructor of this class. His name is Zenon. And she basically informs them that I found a boyfriend. And as Cid is overhearing this conversation, he discovers that she is actually betrothed to Zenon in an arranged marriage that she does not want to be a part of. So she's dating Cid to try to get out of that arrangement with Zenon. And later on, he kind of confronts her on that. He basically says, you're just dating me because you needed a patsy, right? That's why you chose me, because I'm someone who you can easily control. And she's like, yep, that's right. And that's when she shows her true colors. Where before she was kind of being kind of cutesy, a little bit lovey-dovey with Cid. But now she shows her true self, which is just a pretty mean-spirited bitch. And she tells Cid that she knows that his confession was fake, that it was basically a bet that he had to do because she confronted his friends and they immediately squealed because they have no backbone whatsoever. And Cid's like, well, whatever, like, I'm not gonna do this. I don't want to be your boyfriend. I don't want that attention on me. And we have my favorite part of the manga, which is when she says, you're going to continue to act like my boyfriend. And she basically throws money on the floor. And she's like, you'll be rewarded for your troubles. And Cid kind of looks at it and he's like, what? You think I'm the kind of guy who can be swayed by money? And she's like, yeah. He's like, you're right. And we see him and he's bending down. He's picking up the money. And this was a moment I was really looking forward to. And I felt that it left me wanting. Because here, we just see him. He's sitting down. He says, do you think I'm the kind of guy who will, debase himself for money? And she says yes. And then it does like a close-up of his face. And he's like, you're right. And then we see him and he's just leaning over and he's casually picking up the money. Whereas in the manga, as you can see here, it's a lot more hilarious. Like he throws himself on his knees and he's like scooping them up and he's like, damn straight. With a big, giant, joyful smile on his face. So again, it's just, you have these moments that are just hilariously adapted in the manga, but then they're just not translated as well in the anime. It's like this moment should be hilarious. The moment where he reaches enlightenment and gets hit by the truck. In the anime, is portrayed as kind of tragic. It looks like he's having a mental breakdown and he throws himself in front of a truck because he's trying to commit suicide. Whereas in the manga, he sees the lights and he thinks he's finally reached enlightenment and he doesn't realize it's a truck until it hits him. The confession is more overdone and you can see that it's more of an act in the manga. Whereas in the anime, you don't realize it's an act until after he's already completed it. So it's just like, okay. Here, he just casually kind of picks up the money and says, you're right. I am that kind of guy. Whereas in the manga, he throws himself on his knees and he's grabbing as much money as he can and he's proudly yelling, damn straight. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where the manga is really just hitting the hilarity that the novel has. Like the manga is perfectly adapting those scenes and like just visually making them just hilarious. Whereas the anime is just, it's just falling flat. But yeah, we have more moments where like they're eating ice cream together and she basically kind of vents to him about her sister and stuff, as well as explaining why she doesn't want to marry Zenon. Basically, she sees him as too perfect, and that rubs her the wrong way, in the sense that it feels like he's hiding something. Like, to her, she thinks someone who's too perfect in everything, they're either faking it, and they're hiding something very malicious, or they're psychotic. Like, there's got to be something wrong, because no one is that perfect. And I guess a little bit of a spoiler, she's right about something. You guys are just going to have to wait and see. But yeah, she basically just vents at Cid, and she calls him a dog and throws more money at him. And then we have a moment where they're on the train, and she basically says that she says like she hates her sword style and stuff. And Cid compliments her sword style. He basically says that he likes Alexia's swordsmanship. And here in the anime, it's not portrayed as well as it could be, but the basic gist is supposed to be that the reason why Cid compliments her sword style is because it's his. I mean, Cid's obviously a lot better, but the way he portrays his style, how like the blandness of and just the basicness and stuff, that's how Alexia's sword style is. So they basically have the same sword style. So when she starts insulting her sword style, Cid takes it as an insult to himself because their sword styles are the same. So it's just like another funny moment where Cid is just being very narcissist. But that basically ends their relationship, and she goes her separate way. The next day, Cid arrives at school, and he sees a bunch of guards show up, and they say that Alexia never showed up last night. She's been missing, and you were the last person seen with her, and we have to question you. And he puts his hands behind his head, and he kneels down, and that's how it ends. With him saying, oh, I'm going to be in big trouble, I guess. So yeah, this pretty much covers all of Chapter 3 and half of Chapter 4 from the manga. Overall, I would say the pacing in this was a lot better. For anyone who didn't care too much for this episode, I will say that assuming it sticks close to the light novel in the manga, it does get better. This arc starts off kind of slow. It has like its funny moments, especially the moment where she's throwing money at him and he's picking it up. That moment has become like a huge meme. But this arc will pick up and get a lot better as we go along with it. But yeah, the pacing was fine. A lot better than the previous issue. It seems a lot less rushed, and we're actually having time to build characters and stuff like that. It's not just kind of throwing stuff in your face. But overall, I would say that it left me a bit disappointed, a bit wanting, because I'm just like, the manga portrays it so much better, like the hilarity. While this, it seems like they have their hilarious moments, but it almost feels like they don't want to embrace it as much as they could. I mean, this series is supposed to be an all-right comedy. The moment where Cid gets hit by a truck, you're supposed to be laughing. But here, it just comes across as tragic, because he's crying, he's bashing his head on a rock till he's bleeding. It seems like he's like basically having a psychotic breakdown, and then he throws himself in front of a truck. So it looks like he basically had a breakdown and he committed suicide. Whereas in the manga, again, it's not that way at all. In fact, it's more hilarious because he's running towards the truck because he thinks that it's enlightenment. He doesn't know it's a truck until it's about to hit him. And I'm just kind of repeating myself at this point. But yeah, the manga portrays the hilarious scenes a lot better than this scene does. It feels like it doesn't really want to embrace the hilarity. It's like, all right, we'll have some comedy, but we're not going to fully go all out on it like we could. And I feel like that kind of harms the anime in a way. I kind of wish it would go more just balls to the wall with the comedy. Just really embrace the fact that this is not a serious series. And just embrace the over-the-top hilarity that Cid brings to the table. But other than that, voice acting was good. Animation was good. Pacing was good. It's just at this point in time, I still think the manga is a lot more faithful of an adaptation than the anime is. But there you go. Episode 3. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope to see you next time. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with my assessment? Disagree? Leave it below in the comments. But hope to see you next time. Take care. Later.